Hi everybody, and welcome back to This Week in Magic Online Finance. I'm your host, Chaz Andres. It's a little bit cold here in the South, but we're gonna make do, and we're gonna start, as always, with the news. Now, the big news this week is that it's Vintage Masters Flashback Draft Week on Magic Online. That's right, from December 13th through the 20th, you can draft Vintage Masters. And the big story here is that the Power 9 is going to be coming with the original alpha art. So look, I'm as big a fan of the new Power art as anybody. They look great. But come on, this is the original Power 9 art. It's the original Moxen. It's Black Lotus, the most iconic piece of artwork arguably in the history of the game. And I expect these versions of the Power 9 to hold a premium, at least for now. We don't know when we're gonna get a chance to open these again. It might be 6 months from now, it might be a year from now, it might be longer. And in the meantime, these are gonna be held in high demand. So make sure if you want a copy of these, you get them this week. All right, now here's the really confusing thing. There are now two kinds of Vintage Masters packs. There's the old Vintage Masters pack with the Time Walk art. There's the new Vintage Masters packs with the Lion's Eye Diamond art. And if you open the old Time Walk pack, you can only get the new art, older Power. If you open the newer pack with the Lion's Eye Diamond on it, you can only open the newer old art Power. You can use either packs to enter a Vintage Masters draft, but you need to have 3 of a kind. You can't enter with 2 of one and 1 of the other. And no matter which pack you enter a Vintage Masters draft in, as long as you're drafting that Vintage Masters pack, you can only open the new old art Power. Confused? Me too. Just remember, as long as you're entering a draft with whatever packs, you're opening old, new Power, right? Right. It's also worth remembering that there's likely to be a small price dip for other Vintage Masters cards this week. People are going to draft this format either for fun or for a chance at this cool new Power, and they're going to get Jace the Mind Sculptor and Force of Will and Dual Lands, and they're going to throw them at the marketplace if they don't need them. So if you're interested in cards like these, if you've been holding out for a while, I would look to buy around the 18th or 19th of December. Otherwise, please keep a lookout for Vintage and Legacy cards that aren't in Vintage Masters that might actually increase in price this week. I'm keeping an extra special eye out on Wasteland and Rishadan Port, for example. Moving on to Standard, where the card that gained the most ground this week was As Foretold. It tripled in price from 1 ticket up to 3. Now, As Foretold is a standard legal card, but it wasn't a standard deck that caused this gain. It's actually a modern Esper deck, featuring things like Living End and Ancestral Vision and Cryptic Command. So I don't think this is a flash in the pan. It seems like a fairly legitimate deck to me. It's been putting up some decent results, and there are gains all over the world of paper Magic as well as Magic Online. In fact, as we move on to Modern, we'll see that most of the biggest gainers this week are cards from this deck. For example, our biggest gainer of the week is Leyline of Sanctity. It's a sideboard 4 of in that Esper deck, and it climbed 6 tickets this week from 15 up to 21. Ancestral Vision, just reprinted in Iconic Masters, doesn't matter. It's on its way up, climbing 5 tickets from 6 up to 11. Leyline of the Void, another sideboard 4 of in that Esper deck, climbing 4 tickets from 14 up to 18, and one of the biggest gainers of the week, Hilaria West, rocketing up 4 tickets from 1 to 5. That's a crazy increase, but again, it's a 4 of in that deck. And lastly, before we move on to our losers, I just want to follow up on Eidolon of the Great Revel. It was our biggest Modern loser last week, and I told you I couldn't really see a reason why. Luckily, it's regained all that value, so there really was no reason why. If you bought it in the lull like I told you to, great job. You got a really good Modern staple at a nice discount. Of course, I also told you that the Scarab God had bottomed out and was likely to start to rebound again, and I was wrong. The Scarab God was our biggest loser of the week in Standard again this week. It dropped another 4 tickets from 31 all the way down to 27, and that price chart is still dropping. So, look. I think the Scarab God's gonna be good again. I think it'll break the 40 ticket mark at some point, and well, its best days are probably behind it, but I would say that its second best days might be in front of it. That doesn't mean you should buy in now though. Even though I think this price is going to look good at some point in the future, there's no reason not to hold out for the best deal possible. And the price is still coming down, so I'm still holding out. Let's move on to Modern, where the biggest loser of the week was Infernal Tutor. and boy, has that card's price collapsed. It was 40 tickets in late August, it was 20 tickets in late November, it's about 10 tickets now, and that price chart just sort of keeps creeping down. And I'd really like to tell you to buy this now, because it's still useful in Legacy, and the supply is still crazy low. It's only been printed once in Distinction. So there's money probably to be made here at some point, but I don't know. The price chart looks awful. It's still decaying, and I just can't endorse the idea of buying into a card that's still losing value every single week and hasn't gained a single tick since probably July. So I don't know, I'm staying away, but I'm monitoring this situation really closely. All right, it's time for Sneak of the Week, and this week's sneak is Tezzeret, Agent of Bolas. Tezzeret was 5 tickets back in early November, it's up to 12 tickets now, and that price chart is pointed right at the sky. And that's because Tezzeret is a low supply mythic, it was only printed in one small set, and it sees play in many brews of Lantern Control, which is a deck that is continuing to take over share of the modern metagame. And I wouldn't be surprised at this point if the card ends up at 20 or 25 tickets before it finally settles down. So we're gonna end this week with an exciting new segment. It's something I look forward to bringing you every single week when possible, and it's going to be analyzing the latest 7 days of MTGO traders' sales data. They're my sponsors, they provide me with this really interesting information, and it gives us a really good sense of which cards are the most popular on Magic Online right now. Let's go. So looking at the most cards sold by sheer volume, we still have the same 3 multi-format staples at the top of that list: Lightning Bolt, Duress, and Fatal Push. Great cards, you need them for all kinds of decks, but they're joined by 2 exciting newer lands: Aether Hub and Field of Ruin. From a financial perspective, Field of Ruin is the exact kind of card I'm always looking for. It's an uncommon from Ixalan, it's dirt cheap, they're all over the place right now, but it sees a ton of play in Standard, it sees a ton of play in Modern. A year from now, it might be worth a ticket or more, and you can buy a ton of them right now for a ticket. So you should be using this opportunity to buy this card, throw them in your collection, get as many of them as you can for, 5 cents each, whatever, just keep buying 4 of them each time you buy something else, throw them aside, eventually it's gonna pay for a couple of drafts. Now, if we look at the other list that measures not total number of cards sold, but total value sold, it's all Eternal cards. Standard, not so much right now. Last week, Chandra Torch of Defiance and the Scarab God were number 1 and 2 on this list. This week, Chandra's down to number 5, Scarab God's down all the way to number 11. People just aren't buying Standard cards. So what is at the top of the list? Well, Liliana of the Veil is number 1, followed closely by Mox Opal, Force of Will, and Wasteland. Now be careful with Force of Will. It's in Vintage Masters, and a ton of Vintage Masters is going to be open this week. That price is coming down regardless of the fact that demand is high right now. But again, like I mentioned at the top of the show, I'm pretty bullish on Wasteland. Not only do I expect people to be buying this card when they open cool stuff in their Vintage Masters drafts, but I'm already seeing that price chart tick up just a little. In fact, it might end up being a future Sneak of the Week. All right, lastly, let's take a look at our basic lands power ranking. And for the second week in a row, MTGO traders sold more copies of Swamp than any other basic land, putting it at the very top of those power rankings. Meanwhile, Plains is in last place, sold fewer copies than any other lands, putting it in the number 5 slot. And that is all I got for you this week. Thank you so much for joining me. Please don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel. Otherwise, I'll see you again next week. I'm Chaz Andres, and this was This Week in Magic Online Finance.